Eric, thank you. Well, for more on this, we're going to bring in Alex Little. He's a criminal defense and litigation attorney, former prosecutor and former assistant U.S. attorney. Alex, thanks for being here with us. First of all, from your perspective, does this warrant an investigation by the Department of Justice? Also, what is the prerequisite to deploy the DOJ?
So, Arthel, I want to be as sort of clear and straightforward with your viewers as possible. There is no basis, none whatsoever, to investigate the author of this anonymous op-ed. He has broken no law. Neither the president nor the vice president has suggested that he has. And so anyone suggesting otherwise is trying to blow smoke at your viewers. Second, when is it appropriate to use the Department of Justice? Well, they're prosecutors. They investigate cases that are brought to the Department of Justice or brought to the FBI or other law enforcement agencies when there's probable cause or suspicion to believe that a crime has been committed. Nothing about speaking out against the president publicly or anonymously is a crime.
So does this reach the level of a national security breach, and is writing an anonymous and scathing op-ed treasonous?
Yeah. I don't think it's any more treasonous than some of the things that have been reported in Bob Woodward's book, for example. There was an accusation that the president gave an order to assassinate Bashar, the leader in Syria, and the defense secretary said, we're not going to do that, people. I mean, this is a presidency that is unique in the ways that the administration officials are trying to push against the president's whims. But, whether or not that's treasonous, I think becomes what we believe the president has the power to do and should be able to do. When the vice president goes on TV and says that this official, whoever he or she is violating their oath, it just smacks of incredible hypocrisy when you've got a president who every day calls the press, which is protected by the First Amendment, that Constitution he's supposed to uphold, the enemy of the people. And so all of this is just a back and forth, I think, about the turmoil inside the administration. Nothing about it invokes sort of criminal prosecution or some concern that somebody's broken the law.
So you were talking about Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Yes.
Meanwhile, then,
Yes.
So having said everything you have thus far, it's a tongue twister for all of us. Having said everything that you have said thus far, what should and could happen to the author of the op-ed?
So I think what's interesting about this is there's this whole branch of government we haven't talked about, and that's Congress. Certainly, if you're in a cabinet official, you can be impeached. You can be fired in some cases, and you can be impeached. Congress can and should hold hearings if they want to do that. The Republicans control Congress. They have every ability to do their own investigations. I'm surprised that nobody has called for that. I think one reason is there are folks in Congress who feel the same way. The senator here in Tennessee, where I'm from, Corker, has made statements that are very similar to those that were made in this anonymous op-ed. So, I think we have a whole separate branch of government. It's part of our Constitution that's put there to work in situations like this. That's who should be leading this charge if they want to find out who wrote that op-ed.
And, as you just pointed out, that nothing that was published in the op-ed hasn't been said before,
That's right.
Either reported or voiced by various people in Congress or what have you. And some are President Trump's critics as well, have said these things. So listen, I introduced you, Alex, as a criminal defense attorney, a litigation attorney, a former prosecutor, former assistant U.S. attorney. So from that sort of collective perspective, is there anything in the content of the op-ed that would grab the attention of your current or former colleagues?
Not a thing. Not anybody who's working in the areas of national security prosecutions, nobody who's working in the areas of criminal law on a day-to-day basis is going to look at that and say, oh, I think a crime's been committed. The only people who are going to think that are the folks who are trying to please President Trump, who's understandably very upset by that op-ed.
And the president says that he's considering action against the New York Times. Does the president have a strong legal case against the Times?
No, and that's the history of President Trump. He's going to make a lot of, statements about bringing cases. He's going to try to sue a lot of people and dismiss them. That's what he did before he's president, and so those sort of threats aren't surprising. But I don't think they're things that we need to take seriously.
So basically, is this much ado about nothing?
It's not much ado about nothing. Arthel, this is an incredible, unique moment where you have an administration official at the top ranks, according to the New York Times, who is saying essentially the president can't be trusted. But to then turn the camera and say that the problem is that official and not what's actually being said in this op-ed, I think is really shocking. What we need to look at, and I think what the press should be focused on, is are these things this person is saying is true? Can the president not be trusted by his own advisors? And if that's the case, we've got a constitutional crisis that is far greater than whether or not this individual needs to be outed.
Now, you do know that there are people across both sides of the political spectrum or aisle saying that that's just not the way you do it. If you have these concerns, come out,
100%,
show
Arthel.
yourself,
Yes.
and then speak your piece and exit the stage left.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not for a minute defending the way that this individual did this. I think I agree with people on both sides of the aisle who say that if you have these concerns and you hold them truthfully, you should say so publicly. But the cowardice of this official doesn't mean that he or she has committed a crime. And I think those are separate issues. But yes, I'm not at all. I don't think anybody who cares about our democracy and our Constitution should be happy that this is the way that it's transpired. But I do think we have to focus on what's actually happening, and what's happening here is not a crime.
All right, Alex Little, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric?